Hello, my name is Yasha. In this video, which is the first video that we're doing, I'm going to cover my lineage. It's important to understand lineage insofar as where did I get the information that I used in my meditational practices. Having lineage is important insofar as you can follow a specific teaching back through thousands of years, in this case in the Buddhist tradition. It starts with the Tibetan Lamas and goes through the Tibetan tradition to the 6th century and into Sarnath and then back into as far back as the first students of Gautama. Uh, and that student is Malagana. My teachers here in the United States has been Gyudupten Rinpoche IV from Gantok Sikkim, and he came to Berkeley in 1972. He came with Lama Jigsae. Gyalta Rinpoche came down from Bellevue, Canada, and there was 3 Tibetan visiting lamas Tarthang Toku in Berkeley, California at Pedmaling Monastery. Turned out I was given to Duduk Rinpoche as the first Western student, and I turned out to be Chopan to the 3 Tibetan lamas. So I first took refuge in the Buddha Dharma in 1969 with Tarthang Toku, and he introduced me to the formal practices. The first practice is 100,000 prostrations. Then you do 100,000 Vajradhara mantras, then 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras. I did 100,000 White Tara mantras, and then I did 100,000 mandala practices. And this is the mudra for the mandala practice. Now, being Chopan to 3 Tibetan lamas, which was half the Tibetan lamas in the United States, is kind of an interesting problem. I traveled all over the United States and Hawaii and Canada with these 3 lamas creating various Dharma centers. One of the things that we created was a traditional translation of what's called the first ceremony that was translated from the Tibetan into English transliteration and into a translation. And that ceremony has been adopted by almost all Tibetans in the West since that time. I've done other meditational practices, which includes learning the hidden lines of the mandala from Khenpo Tupen and Lama Jigsae in Providence, Rhode Island in 1975. I built the first celestial mansion in Berkeley with Gyalta Rinpoche, again in 1975. In 1976, Gyalta Rinpoche and I traveled to Maui and we built the very first Tibetan-style stupa in Maui. I built a second stupa for the local Hawaiian kakunas on the west side of Haleakala, and that's a very hidden stupa, and you can only get there through invitation from the kahunas that you're not going to get. I've done other practices. I was introduced to the Bardo practices by Lama Jigsae, which is 100,000 Yamataka mantras. These are my principal meditational practices that include what are called the Bong Non. A Bong Non practice is a practice that you find out about, like prostrations. And you are given permission to do those practices by a lineage holder. You do that practice, and then you are tested at the end of the practice to see if your experiences and the answers that you get during that meditational experience is the same as everyone else for the last 2,500 years. So I've done 25 of those Bong Non kinds of practices. Other teachers I've had was Sun Sanim, a Korean Zen master in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was there at 48 Hope Street when he first started the Zen Center. I was invited there by Jacob Pearl. I've also studied with Xuan Hua at the Gold Mountain Monastery in the Mission District in San Francisco, as well as Yogi Chen, who's a marvelous, wonderful yoga master in Berkeley in the late 60s. This is a good summary of the traditional practices that I've completed, and we will go through each of those particular practices along with the Longchen Mintig, which is part of the Tibetan, the Tambolian map here, which is a translation of the Longchen Mintig visualization, which I was given by Tarthang Toku, and I later met the original artist of this particular visualization in Bellevue, Canada. This concludes the presentation of my formal lineage. I want to remind you that I'm including a manuscript of this presentation in the lineage, in the access below. Thank you, and Sarva Mangalam.